Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Hanjung Liuya. Chapter 135. Shadow Clan Master. Part 1. The Five Mountains Alliance, a group of faithful subordinates to Jiang Nung A.K., the second disciple of the society leader. The severed head of Wai Mengqion, the second-ranked member known as Second Mountain, fell lifelessly to the ground as blood gushed like a fountain from his neck. Thud. Although Wai Mengqion always maintained a calm demeanor, his final expression was close to a scream. Thump. Thump. Soon, Mok Jiangun's right hand, which had turned black and grotesquely swollen, returned to its original state. This was the essence of the acupoint striking technique. It was difficult to maintain for long due to its severe side effects, but it could increase one's power by 2 to 3 times for a short period. Mok Jiangun had carefully saved this technique and utilized it at the appropriate moment to behead Wai Mengqion. Swish. Chong Ryong lightly descended in front of Mok Jiangun. It was decent, but you still have a long way to go. You're right. Mok Jiangun readily admitted it. Even though his other senses were extraordinarily sharp, his opponent was a blind man. He had struggled quite a bit in a pure duel against such an opponent. Initially, he had intended to win the fight solely with the death energy from his lower Danjian and pure techniques, but as the battle prolonged, he ended up using the power of his Danjian and the acupoint striking technique. Thus, despite eliminating the target, he wasn't entirely satisfied. On the other hand, he's fast. Although Chong Ryan had said Mok Jiangun still had a long way to go, she inwardly clicked his tongue at Mok Jiangun's growth rate. Strictly speaking, the blind Wai Mengqion was a superior master compared to Mok Jiangun. He was far above in both internal energy and experience. In fact, befitting his experience, he even demonstrated the ability to pressure Mok Jiangun by using variations at every appropriate moment. However, Mok Jiangun was learning as he fought. It was admirable to witness. I thought he would struggle more. It was different from what she had expected. Due to the lack of time, even if they had fought more with just their lower Danjians, Chong Ryan thought there might have been a chance for Mok Jiangun to win. From the perspective of someone observing closely, it was a growth rate that defied explanation. Meanwhile, Mok Jiangun spoke while looking at Wai Mengqion's corpse. Ho! Why are you? HM? Chong Ryan's eyes also widened in surprise. That's because the death energy from Wai Mengqion's corpse was gathering and condensing. What's happening? Mok Jiangun had intended to absorb the death energy before it dispersed. However, unlike before, the death energy wasn't scattering but converging. Chong Ryan chuckled and said, "It's your first time seeing this, right?" Seeing what? The birth of a proper vengeful spirit. Is this it? That's right. Mok Jiangun, who had mastered various techniques, including the 6-people spirit summoning technique, could artificially create vengeful spirits using death energy. However, this was the first time he had witnessed one naturally forming. If that was the case, he must have felt quite wronged. Ordinary resentment isn't enough for a vengeful spirit to form. If the death energy was condensing to this extent, it meant that the resentment had reached its peak. Soon, the condensed death energy began to take on a human form. The level of a vengeful spirit is determined by the strength of the obsession and resentment the individual possessed during their lifetime. Tremble! As it took shape, the handle of the broken bamboo sword trembled. A soul that has lost its physical body clings to an object to prevent itself from leaving the mortal realm. That handle was likely that object. It seems his resentment was quite strong. Chong Ryan was intrigued. Even though it was still in the process of fully taking shape, judging by the spiritual energy emanating from it, it was at least at the orange spirit level or above. The vengeful spirit finally took complete form. Grr! With flickering white eyes, Wai Mengqion glared at Mok Jiangun. How unjust! How unfair! I wanted to follow that person, achieve great things, and open my eyes, but to die like this and become a ghost. A voice filled with resentment. Wai Mingqion didn't take his eyes off Mok Jiangan. In death, I get to see the face of my enemy. I curse you. I will follow you until you die and torment you. Wai Mingqion, who was speaking, suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Something was strange. As he had become a vengeful spirit naturally, he was aware of his own death. Thus, he also instinctively understood the principles of the boundary between the living and the dead. However, why did he feel like Mok Jiangan was making eye contact with his dead self? At that moment, you seem to have a lot to say. A newly formed vengeful spirit is quite talkative. You? Could it be that you can see me? If I can see you, that's why I'm responding like this, right? You did this to me. Realizing that Mok Jiangan could see him, Wai Mingqion, filled with even more rage, lunged at Mok Jiangan with the intent to kill. At that instant, grab! Ugh! Wai Mingqion's white pupils trembled. It was because Mok Jiangan had suddenly grabbed his neck. What is this? He was a dead man. How could Mok Jiangan grab the neck of his dead self? What the hell are you? How? As he was utterly baffled, a voice from behind startled Wai Mingqion. Hey, youngster. For someone whose corpse hasn't even gone cold, you sure are lively. Vengeful spirits can instinctively distinguish levels. Wai Mingqion's mind grew hazy from the immense spiritual pressure he felt from behind. What kind of energy is this? This wasn't just a simple vengeful spirit level but a calamity level existence. His spirit body trembled, and his lips wouldn't close. To the terrified Wai Mingqion, Mok Jiangan said, "This is the first time I've seen a case of someone becoming a vengeful spirit like this. What should I do?" "What do you mean, what should you do?" "Just absorb the death energy and exorcise it." "Ah, right. That would be better." Squish. With that, Mok Jiangan raised his death energy and tried to apply more force to Wai Mingqion's neck. At first, Wai Mingqion didn't understand what exorcism meant. Sizzle. However, along with a strange sense of pain, he felt a threat as if his spirit body was gradually disappearing. It instilled an even more intense fear than when he had faced death. Wai Mingqion hurriedly cried out, "Spare me. You're already dead. Please give me a chance." "Would a chance hold much meaning for you?" I don't wish for anything else. Just let me see the faces of my wife and child one last time. Then I'll accept exorcism or whatever else." "Wife and child?" Mok Jiangan tilted his head slightly as if puzzled. Wai Mingqion spoke in a pleading voice. "Long ago, after losing my eyesight to the glorious snake poison, I had a single wish. It was to see the faces of my wife and child." This was true. Wai Mingqion had an earnest desire. It was to somehow cure his blinded eyes and see the faces of his family. Zhang Neng, the second disciple of the society leader, had promised Wai Mingqion that if he achieved great things, he would help him find the medicine immortal He Yang to restore his eyesight, which had been blinded by poison, though it was uncertain whether it would be possible. But who would have known that he would be able to see after dying? "I beg you. I can't leave this world like this. If you grant me this, you can kill me or do whatever you want." He had no significant lingering attachments to anything else. Wai Mingqion simply wanted to see the faces of his wife and child, whom he had never seen while alive. As he expressed his wish, the corner of Mok Jiangan's mouth curled up. "Ah, I thought you became a vengeful spirit solely due to resentment, but there were also precious beings who left you with lingering attachments in life." Gasp. At Mok Jiangan's words, Wai Mingqion instantly realized his mistake. He had said those words out of fear of being extinguished and a desire to resolve his only lingering attachment, but upon reflection, it wasn't something he should have asked of this bastard. Wasn't this bastard the very culprit who had killed him? As he thought he had made a mistake, Mok Jiangan whispered in his ear, just like before killing him. "That's fortunate. Then you'll be able to work a bit more voluntarily compared to other spirit servants." What the hell was he talking about now? As he was puzzled, Wei Mingqiao noticed Chong Ryong looking at him with sympathetic eyes. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Mok Jiangan, who had finished his business outside and returned from his outing. As he was about to pass through the entrance pavilion leading to his private residence, Mok Jiangan's eyes narrowed. He lightly scanned the surroundings and immediately noticed that the guard warriors who were supposed to be protecting the area had disappeared. The people who should have been there were absent. Smirking, Mok Jiangan entered the building of his private residence as if he didn't mind. Walking along the corridor, he opened the door to a room. "You're late." As the door opened, a familiar voice came from inside. It was none other than the Shadow Clan master. Surprise flickered in Mok Jiangan's eyes. He had dismissed everyone earlier without much explanation, so why was he waiting alone for Mok Jiangan? There was no presence felt within a radius of about 20 zhang around them. Puzzled, Mok Jiangan was about to clasp his hands and bow in greeting, but the Shadow Clan master interrupted him. "Where have you been?" "Training." "You don't need to make such a flimsy lie about being at the market." The clan master's voice was unusually heavy and cold, different from his usual demeanor. It seemed to be an extension of his earlier behavior. The clan master tapped his finger on the table and continued, "How far did you go with the head of the intruder?" Mok Jiangan feigned ignorance and nonchalantly replied, "I have no idea what you're talking about, master." The head was missing from the crematorium. At the clan master's words, Mok Jiangan licked his lips and fell silent. It seemed that the clan master had personally checked the crematorium after Mok Jiangan's visit. Mok Jiangan shrugged and said, "I apologize, but I don't understand why you're asking me about it. I did leave the residence briefly, but if you ask the guard warriors, I still can't comprehend it even after pondering." "What? What kind of trick did you use? What trick are you referring to?" At Mok Jiangan's counter-question, the clan master sighed and shook his head. Then he stood up from his seat and spoke. "There's something called a sense of discomfort or unease. It was small at first, making it difficult to notice, but at some point, the surroundings centered around you became engulfed in that unease." The clan master found it puzzling. The members of the Shadow Clan were thoroughly trained in mental discipline, as they also acted as spies and handled confidential matters. Thus, there was a belief that they would never betray the sect. But how was this possible? It had only been 7 days. Within this short period, how could they have been swayed by Mok Jiangan, who was merely a hostage of the righteous faction? "I don't know what strange technique you used, but even though you've become an official disciple, it seems you've crossed a line that can't be overlooked." Shing! The sound of something being drawn was heard. It was the sound of a blade being unsheathed from the scabbard at the clan master's waist. In an instant, the sharp blade was pressed against the underside of Mok Jiangan's chin. Swish! Mok Jiangan's eyes narrowed. He had anticipated a certain gap in strength, but the clan master's martial prowess was incomparable to Wei Mingqiao, who was a subordinate of Zhang Neng, the second disciple of the society leader. He's strong. With pure martial arts from the lower Danjian alone, it was utterly impossible to do anything against him. At that moment, the clan master spoke in an even colder voice. "Depending on your answer, I may have to behead you. So from now on, I'd like you to respond clearly to my questions." Before he could finish his sentence, the clan master frowned. It was because Mok Jiangan had laughed. Seeing this, the clan master recalled the smile filled with malice that Mok Jiangan had shown when he beheaded the intruder to quell the confusion. It was the first time he had felt a chill down his spine and sensed danger upon seeing someone smile. The clan master's grip on the blade tightened. "That smile just now. Your intuition is quite sharp. To reach such a conclusion based on a mere sense of unease. So, are you going to behead me?" At that question, the clan master's gaze sharpened. Mok Jiangan's response just now was tantamount to affirming that the clan master's suspicions were correct. Although he didn't reveal how he had done it. One thing was certain, this child was truly dangerous. It wasn't simply because he was a hostage of the righteous faction or had outstanding talent, but the person himself was completely different from the ordinary. It seems it would be beneficial for the sect to behead you right now. Perhaps. The clan master inwardly clicked his tongue at Mok Jayangan's composed reaction. He had to admit, the child had guts to show such composure even when his life was being threatened. However, merit was merit, and death was death. If this child was left unchecked, that sense of unease would engulf the entire Shadow Clan. Grip. The clan master gripped the blade's handle, ready to exert force. It was at that very moment. But you know, if you behead me, everyone will find out that master is a worshipper of fire. I wonder if that would be all right. The clan master's expression instantly stiffened. This bastard. How does he know that? Chapter 136. Shadow Clan Master. Part 2. Just an hour and 15 minutes ago. Mok Jayangan sighed lightly as he looked at the window paper, illuminated by the surrounding torches. Things were unfolding just as he had anticipated. Mok Jayangan glanced at the scroll he held in his left hand. It was something that the evil spirit possessing Bayok, the bodyguard of the Shadow Clan Master, had secretly brought. Every day at the same time, the Shadow Clan Master repeatedly read this scroll. I think I should read it now. You should. Judging by the situation, it seemed there wouldn't be an opportunity to examine it leisurely. And if he were to be caught with it during a room search, things would escalate further. With that, Mok Jayangan unrolled the scroll. Rustle. It was quite worn, indicating how much it had been handled. The half-unrolled scroll. The evil spirit possessing Bayok frowned upon seeing it. This is... The evil spirit had only seen the Shadow Clan Master reading it but had never seen its contents. So he had no idea what it was about. However, it's not our language. Surprisingly, the scroll was not written in Hanyu, Chinese, but in an utterly unrecognizable script. Chong Ryong, seeing it for the first time as well, tilted his head while holding his pipe. The curvy writing was difficult to find any regularity in, making it unlikely to be a secret code. If that was the case, it might not be a language from the Central Plains. Oh, this looks like the language of Persia. What? Chong Ryong's eyes widened as she stared at Mok Jayangan. The country known as Persia, or Parsa, was a place he knew to be located on the northern coast beyond the western regions, not in the Central Plains. Kid, can you read this? Roughly, yes. What? How could this kid read it? As she was puzzled, Mok Jayangan scratched his head and said, My grandfather taught me. Grandfather? Yes. He taught me a few languages besides Hanyu. He said it would be helpful for studying medicine from the western regions. Huh. He taught the language of Persia, which might never be used in a lifetime, just to teach medicine. Chong Ryong became curious about what kind of person Mok Jayangan's grandfather was. But that wasn't important right now. What does it say? Well, it seems to be some kind of poetic verse. This body, burned in the sacred fire, has no attachment to life and death. On the path I wish to take, I illuminate the light. Enough. Pardon? I understand. You do? Yes. I thought it might be a martial arts verse, but it's not. This is a scripture. Scripture? A scripture, like a Buddhist sutra, isn't it a text used for religious prayers? What kind of scripture was this? As Mok Jayangan was puzzled, Chong Ryong clicked his tongue and said, It's truly deplorable. The head of the confidential information department in the sect is a worshipper of fire. Worshipper of fire? Something came to Mok Jayangan's mind as he tilted his head. It was the word Beiwa mentioned in the conversation between the Shadow Clan Master and the External Affairs Director. Beiwa literally meant bowing to fire. Could it be related to this scripture about worshipping fire? Worship. Beiwa. Huh? How do you know about the Beiwa faith? Beiwa faith? What's that? This scripture. It seems to be a scripture of the Beiwa faith. Beiwa faith? Ah. Unlike Mok Jiangun, who was questioning, the evil spirit also nodded as if he knew something. Chang Ryong puffed on his pipe and explained to the puzzled Mok Jiangun. They'll likely break in soon, so I'll give you a brief explanation. The Beiwa faith is literally a religious group that reveres fire. They worship a god from the western regions that you've never heard of. A god from the western regions? Yes. It's a kind of impure heresy. Well, it's tiresome to discuss such things. At one point, this Beiwa faith entered the Central Plains and spread among the common people. Most religions were like that. They started from the lowest class, the commoners. Those who had nowhere to rely on and were impoverished wanted to hold on to something and rise. As the doctrine of the Beiwa faith spread, it suddenly grew rapidly and became a threat to those who believed in Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism as their core principles. A threat? Rather than a threat, wouldn't they have viewed it unfavorably? Anything new was bound to face rejection in some way. Listening to the story, it doesn't seem to have had a good outcome. That's right. They were accused of deceiving the world and misleading the people, leading to a massive crackdown. That was about 100 years ago. But I didn't know there were still people who believed in the Beiwa faith, let alone someone in charge of information and secrets in the Heaven and Earth Society. Chang Ryong spoke as if disappointed. From this, it seemed that she also didn't view the Beiwa faith favorably. If a dead spirit like her felt this way, it could be imagined how most people would think about this religious group. At that moment, a shout was heard from outside. Intruder, listen up. If you don't surrender immediately, we will shoot to kill. Mok Jiangun tried to roll up the scroll again. But as he did so, something fell out from inside and was about to hit the floor. He caught it as if snatching it mid-air. Tap. What was this? Hari man. Along with this word, something was written below. Rather than a doctrine, it seemed to be giving a strong warning. Mok Jiangun stared at it intently, then inserted the paper with that word back into the scroll and handed it to the evil spirit. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Back to the present. The Shadow Clan master gripped the blade's handle, ready to exert force. It was at that very moment. But you know, if you behead me, everyone will find out that master is a worshipper of fire. I wonder if that would be all right. At those words, the Shadow Clan master's expression stiffened. Seeing his reaction, a glimmer of surprise flashed in Mok Jiangun's eyes. His prediction was indeed correct. When he mentioned reciting the scripture at a similar time every day, Chang Ryong had said that the Shadow Clan master might be a believer of the Beiwa faith, a religion that worships fire. Slam. At that moment, the Shadow Clan master grabbed Mok Jiangun by the collar and roughly shoved him against the wall. Bang! His characteristic demeanor that seemed infinitely light had completely vanished, and he glared with eyes filled with murderous intent as he spoke. You bastard! Where did you hear such a rumor? A rumor? Slice. The blade slightly dug into Mok Jiangun's neck. If he slashed here, his neck would be cut. Mok Jiangun chuckled and said, If it's a rumor, you could just laugh it off. Why are you overreacting like this? You. Stab. The blade dug deeper into Mok Jiangun's neck. It was to clearly show that he could kill him. However, this kid? The Shadow Clan master's eyes sharpened. Even when his life was in immediate danger, Mok Jiangun still maintained a smile. It wasn't because he was confident that the Shadow Clan master wouldn't slash him. It seemed as if he had no attachment to his life or wasn't afraid of death at all. This was the first time he had seen someone like this. Aren't you afraid? Of what? That you might die at any moment. If I die, I die. If I live, I live. What more is there to think about? At Mok Jiangun's words, the Shadow Clan master fell silent. Then, after glaring at Mok Jiangun for a moment, he spoke again. You said everyone would find out if you killed me. Have you told this to anyone else? The Shadow Clan Master's eyes trembled slightly as he asked this. He was worried that someone else might already know. Mok Jiangun smiled and said, "Who knows? Maybe I said that because those who should know already know." Thud. Ugh. As soon as he finished speaking, the Shadow Clan Master's hand struck Mok Jiangyuan's abdomen. It looked like a simple strike, but the impact spread inward, causing pain throughout his internal organs. But it didn't end there. Twist. The Shadow Clan Master grabbed Mok Jiangun's abdomen with his 5 fingers and twisted it as if turning. As the muscles twisted, immense pain surged through him. "If you don't speak properly right now, you..." The Shadow Clan Master frowned as he spoke. This technique was something he had personally devised as a master of torture, maximizing pain by inducing internal pain and then twisting the muscles. It was a method as painful as bone breaking and muscle tearing. But there was no change in Mok Jiangun's expression. This kid? Except for briefly holding his breath the moment the internal pain was inflicted, he maintained a smile amidst this tremendous pain. What kind of person was he? Drip. At that moment, blood flowed from Mok Jiangun's mouth. It was a natural phenomenon since he had suffered internal injuries. He was such a vicious person that his expression didn't change even when he was in pain and bleeding. The more he learned about him, the more he realized that this kid was truly unique in many ways. From his martial arts talent to everything else. Although it was a pity, this secret must never be revealed. "Tell me who you told. Then I'll spare your life." "You shouldn't do that." "What? If you find out who I told, you'll have to kill that person and me too. That's how a secret disappears, right?" Twist. The Shadow Clan Master twisted Mok Jiangun's abdominal muscles even more. And he pressed on in a low voice. "Who are you trying to teach?" "I'm not trying to teach you. I just said that because you were telling such an obvious lie about sparing my life." "You? Mocking him in this situation?" It was incomprehensible what he was doing in a situation where provoking the other party would bring no benefit. Even if he wasn't afraid of death, this was going too far. It was then. This body, burned in the sacred fire, has no attachment to life and death. On the path I wish to take, I illuminate the light. Joy and sorrow shall remain as mere dust. Pity the troubled sentient beings. At the scripture recited from Mok Jiangun's mouth, the Shadow Clan Master's expression froze. How did this kid know the scripture, the doctrine of the Beiwa faith? The Shadow Clan Master couldn't hide his bewilderment. How could it be? It was absolutely impossible for him to have seen his scripture. Even if he had seen it, it was written in the language of Persia, the predecessor of the Beiwa faith, so only a handful of people in the Central Plains, let alone within the Heaven and Earth Society, could read it. Even among the few remaining believers of the Beiwa faith, who had barely survived the persecution, most couldn't read it properly, so how could this kid recite it? That was absolutely not the case. But how could he recite the contents of the scripture so fluently and accurately? Unless he already knew. Release. The Shadow Clan Master hurriedly removed his hand completely from Mok Jiangyuan's abdomen and said, "You. Could it be that you're a believer of our faith?" Chapter 137. Shadow Clan Master. Part 3. After nearly 100 years of constant persecution, few believers of the Beiwa faith could read the original scriptures, even among the surviving members. The Shadow Clan Master didn't think Mok Jiangun would be able to read the original text in the Persian language. Persian was unexpectedly difficult to learn, and experts in it were extremely rare throughout the Central Plains. Assuming all of this, it meant that Mok Jiangun already knew the doctrine of the scripture. Release. The Shadow Clan Master hurriedly removed his hand completely from Mok Jiangyuan's abdomen and said, "You. Could it be that you're a believer of our faith?" Believer? At the Shadow Clan Master's question, Mok Jiangun's eyes sparkled. He had predicted various scenarios of how the Shadow Clan Master would react if he recited the contents of the scripture, and quite an interesting reaction had emerged. Don't tell me you're planning to pretend to be a believer? Chang Ryong clicked her tongue and spoke. She didn't approve of Mok Jiangan getting involved with the Beiwa faith. And it's your choice if you want to deceive him. But how much do you think you can deceive him with just one scripture? A suspicious eunuch like him will quickly see through it. Well, if it's just that, it might be possible. The Shadow Clan master was in charge of information and spies in the Shadow Clan. Regardless of his hidden identity, he was a suspicious person, so if Mok Jiangan clumsily pushed forward as a believer, he could be easily exposed, as Chang Ryong warned. Deception is a gamble. The way to increase the probability of that gamble is to base it on as much truth as possible. With that, Mok Jiangan, who knows what? Although I have received teachings about the scripture, it's difficult to call myself a believer with just that. At Mok Jiangan's words, one of the Shadow Clan master's eyebrows arched up. What was this kid saying now? He received teachings about the scripture? What do you mean by that? It's exactly as I said. I received teachings about the scripture, but I didn't become a believer. If I had to specify, should I say I'm a follower? Follower? There is a strict difference between a believer and a follower. A believer is someone who is completely subordinate to the faith and works for it. On the other hand, a follower refers to someone who believes in the religious group and its doctrine. Follower. With that, the Shadow Clan master asked in a voice filled with suspicion, "You said you're a follower, so who taught you about our faith scripture?" "I don't know." "What? You don't know?" What was he saying now? Mok Jiangan shrugged and said, "The old master who taught me the scripture didn't tell me his name." "He didn't tell you his name?" "Yes. He firmly refused to tell me. He said if I knew his name, I would face the same difficulties as him." At Mok Jiangan's words, the Shadow Clan master's eyes narrowed. The Beiwa faith had long been heavily persecuted, so most of its believers were organized in small groups, and sometimes they didn't even know each other's identities. There's some truth to that. There was no way he would reveal his true identity to a non-believer. However, as a high-ranking position of father, he had some knowledge of the identities of important believers in each base. "Do you remember the appearance of the old master you met?" At the Shadow Clan master's question, Mok Jiangan casually replied. He had a face full of age spots and a thick gray beard that reached his chest. Any other distinguishing features? It was impossible to identify someone with just that. Wasn't what he just described a natural phenomenon of aging that occurs with age? Mok Jiangan shrugged and said. His thick beard and long eyebrows covered half of his face, and he had a shabby appearance, so it's difficult for me to describe any specific features. There's no way to know who he is like that. Of course not. But would someone who doesn't even teach his name carelessly show his proper appearance? At Mok Jiangan's words, the Shadow Clan master's eyes narrowed. It was definitely a valid point, but he couldn't trust it. The Shadow Clan master spoke in a sharp voice. Do you think I would readily believe that you received teachings about our faith scripture from an old master whose name and face you don't even know? Of course, it would be hard for you to believe. Then why would I? I received teachings about the scripture from him in the original language. The Shadow Clan master frowned. Receiving teachings about the scripture in the original language meant he had learned it in Persian, not Hanyu, Chinese. If he knew the original text to that extent, he was definitely not an ordinary believer. But there was no proper evidence. As if reading his thoughts, Mok Jiangan turned his head and pointed to the desk with his eyes. On the desk were writing tools. Seeing his intention to write, the Shadow Clan master glared at Mok Jiangan's face for a moment before releasing his remaining hand that was grabbing his collar. Try writing it. Mok Jiangan went to the desk, poured water to grind the ink, dipped the brush in the ink, and began writing on the paper. Swish. Dot, dot. Any varbi gozari d data set sok ta m godas at shbaj sad inezranees tam pesh yaman zon degi v morgazi man. Rag t a sas b emojid che dot bivad kahad kok jazz kame gom v shadi v t abdiroy dab ka yadmi k ya rampani b ya, and gyz. This body, burned in the sacred fire, has no attachment to life and death. On the path I wish to take, I illuminate the light. Joy and sorrow shall remain as mere dust. Pity the troubled sentient beings. The Shadow Clan Master's eyes trembled rapidly as he watched this. The gaze that had been filled with disbelief until before Mok Jyangun started writing changed in an instant. How can this be? This wasn't a handwriting that could be written by clumsily memorizing the shape, but one that required proper learning. If one drew the strokes like a picture, it couldn't be written like this. The Shadow Clan Master, who had studied the Persian language for a long time, was even more certain of it. He must have learned from a believer of at least father level. Otherwise, there was no way he could write Persian so skillfully. The Shadow Clan Master, who had been looking at the scripture written in Persian with amazement, turned his gaze to Mok Jyangun. This could be definitive proof. Why would Mok Jyangun, a 17-year-old from a renowned martial arts family in Anhui province, learn Persian and use it for anything? Chong Ryong clicked her tongue as he witnessed this scene. Thanks to Jyangun's proficiency in Persian, that suspicious eunuch was gradually lowering his guard. After all, unless one was a merchant or an interpreter authorized to trade across the western regions, there would be no reason to learn Persian. It was truly a coincidence that he had learned it from his so-called grandfather. At that moment, the Shadow Clan Master spoke. The believer who taught you Persian must have been at least a father. Father? A high-ranking believer who can give teachings about the scripture in our faith. Is that so? Yes. Those who can teach in the original language are few now, so it would have been better if you knew his name. The Shadow Clan Master clicked his tongue as if genuinely regretting it. Then he asked, "Did he only teach you the scripture in Persian?" At this question, Mok Jyangun hesitated for a moment as if he had been waiting for it and opened his mouth. Now that I think about it, he seemed to be searching for something. Searching for something? Yes. My memory is hazy, but at that time, I heard him clearly say, right. He said he was searching for the incarnation of Ahriman. At those words, the Shadow Clan Master's eyes widened in surprise. Mok Jyangun had anticipated that the Shadow Clan Master would react this way. That's because... Ahriman, my devil. That sentence at the beginning of the paper inserted between the original scripture. That word was Ahriman. He hadn't even told Chong Ryong about the interpretation of it, but, beware, for the incarnation of Ahriman may appear in this world. It had a sentence of warning written on it. It seemed to be some kind of revelation within the Beiwa faith. He thought this also had value in using it, and judging by the Shadow Clan Master's reaction, it seemed successful. It was then. Grab. The Shadow Clan Master grabbed Mok Jyangun's shoulder and spoke, unable to hide his excitement. I think I know who taught you the original text. What? He knows who taught this? It was truly an absurd situation to say he knew who a non-existent, imaginary person was. However, Mok Jyangun didn't show it. Regardless, the Shadow Clan Master had a completely excited expression. Only 2 guardians, including myself, have heard the revelation of the holy fire that he prophesied. Among them, only Guardian Zhang is over 60 years old. If what Mok Jyangun said was true, it had to be Guardian Zhang. He had been discouraged, thinking that both guardians had died after his disappearance. But if this was true, it was a great relief. If you received teachings from him, you can't be considered a mere follower. You also have the qualification to be a father. He has the qualification to be a father? Who did he guess it was to have this reaction? Although puzzled, Mok Jyangun casually expressed humility. I only learned the scripture, so how can I have the qualification to be a father? But you said you think you know who it is. Since he kept it a secret from you until the end, it's difficult to tell you right away. But one thing is certain, he is a very high-ranking person in our faith. Ah. Do you happen to know where he went after teaching you the scripture? I apologize, but I don't know. He suddenly disappeared one day. Ah. At Mok Jayanun's words, the Shadow Clan master couldn't hide his disappointment. Still, he thought he should find solace in the fact that the guardian, whom he had thought dead, was alive. As he was thinking that, Mok Jayanun spoke to him in a low voice, but before the old master disappeared, he left something behind. He left something behind? Yes. What is it? The Shadow Clan master asked in a voice filled with anticipation, thinking it might be a clue. It was a sentence written in Persian, but it was so vague that I couldn't understand its meaning. He wrote it in Persian? Try writing it. With that, Mok Jayanun picked up the brush and wrote a word. Ru Smasher, Sword Spirit. Seeing this, the Shadow Clan master frowned. Then he soon opened his mouth and muttered, Blade of the Soul? That's what it would be if directly translated from Persian. What does this mean? After pondering for a moment, he spoke as if he had realized something. Ghost. Blade? The Blade of the Soul could also be called the Ghost Blade. If it was according to the sentence he had left, the only thing that immediately came to mind was the Ghost Blade, one of the 8 stars who was called the current Supreme Master of the martial arts world. At the Shadow Clan master's speculation, the corner of Mok Jayanun's mouth curled up. Huh. Seeing this, Chong Ryong sincerely clicked her tongue. What a truly absurd guy. He created a plausible lie based on the information he knew, matching the Shadow Clan master's reactions, and now he was leading the situation as he intended. He intends to make this ball-less search for the Ghost Blade.